Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And if you'd please remain standing after the pledge, we're going to give a silent moment tribute to some folks that passed away here this last month. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, we had some real sad news over the holidays. We had actually 3 ex-board members pass away. Don Hill, who was a long-term board member here in Hartland, along with Ted Ekman, and our clerk, Larry Hopkins. So on behalf of the board, if we would please take a moment of silence and thank them in our prayers and their families in our prayers and thoughts as we respect and remember them and their giving us to our community. Thank you very much. I'm going to suggest that Treasurer Horning take over the duties as the clerk during our meetings until we have a replacement. So, Treasurer Horning, would you please call the roll?
Sure. Trustee Germain?
Here.
Trustee Kalani?
Here.
Trustee Harper?
Here.
Trustee Petrucci?
Here.
Supervisor Fountain?
Here.
Treasurer Horning here. We have quorum.
Thank you. Item number 5 is approval of our meeting agenda. So moved. Support. Motion by Trustee Harper, second by Trustee Germain. Is there any discussion on the agenda? Being none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item number 6 is call to the public. Anybody this evening want to come to call to the public? Being nobody at call to the public, we'll move on to item number 7, which is approval of our consent agenda.
So moved.
Support. Motion by Treasurer Horning, second by Trustee Harper. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. We have no pending business this evening. We have no new business this evening. We'll move on to board reports. Our first meeting in January starts with Treasurer Horning.
I have nothing this evening.
Trustee Kalani.
I have nothing this evening.
Trustee Germain.
I have a question. My question is, I kind of think of the gateways into the Hartland Township being the expressway, US 23, Old 23, and M59. And we have nice welcoming signs on M59, both at the east and the west, but nothing on Old 23 at our border with Brighton Township. And I noticed recently that Brighton Township has put up a sign, a fairly nice one, and I was curious if there's a restriction on us doing that, or if we've never explored it, or it's just a question I'm wanting to raise.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, the plan is, it had been in the strategic plan to look at wayfinding and gateway signage in the next couple of years, so that we will be doing that, and Old 23 is definitely one of those gateways.
Thank you. Trustee Harper?
No report.
Trustee Petrucci?
No report.
I just have a couple of items. We asked everybody to check their calendars for next Tuesday for a potential meeting. That was going to be
I'm thinking maybe not if, as we look at these other meetings.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, James, I'll let you discuss that under your report then.
Okay.
And just FYI, all the supervisors get together quarterly, and we're going to be having a meeting on the 16th of January at Hamburg. I'll bring back a report from that meeting. If you hadn't heard, the Hartland Merit plant is supposed to close this month, I believe, and then they're going to start demolition in the spring of the actual plant itself. Mm-hmm. That's a couple of years earlier than anticipated, correct?
Yes.
And we're going to talk about appointments later on this evening, or we're going to do that at our next meeting.
Well, this would be the point, if you're looking to do some immediately, potentially, for committees or...
I guess I wanted to, there was a couple different things that came across with Larry's passing. We haven't really looked as a board in a long time about the current committees that our board members are on, and perhaps we should sit down as a group and see if there needs to be a change, or somebody wants to look at something differently. We haven't had that discussion in a long time. So I thought that would perhaps be best suited when we get the replacement. But the planning commission and such is going to need that. So I just want to make sure that we're on top of that. It doesn't have to happen this evening, but it should happen in short order. So I'm just bringing that to the attention of the board.
Otherwise, we had talked about, the Planning Commission is going to continue to meet. They have 2 meetings this month, and so if there's a board member, if you can't make a decision tonight or at the next meeting, that'll be after their first meeting.
Well, again, I've had one board member approach myself, and Joe Collini had said that he would be willing to step into that role as the liaison from the board. Joe was on the Planning Commission for several years. I don't remember how many you were on, Joe, 5 or 6 years?
No, it wasn't that long.
Wasn't that long?
About 3.
Seemed like 5 or 6.
There's a lot going on back then.
There was a lot going on back then. So I'm not sure if does the appointment for that actually come from the supervisor, or is it a consensus of the board?
It's your appointment with a confirmation of the board to make, yeah.
Well, if there's no discussion, I'm just trying to...
Unless there's somebody
Is
dying.
there somebody else that wants to...
Everybody else.
I'm looking at...
If Joe's willing to do it, I'm happy with that.
There's a big time commitment that goes, as we all know. Joel, you sat on that. I didn't see you chiming in.
No. I got enough.
He raised his hand.
I got enough to do with the fire authority.
And obviously, with any appointments that we make, if there's a time commitment or something that needs to change, you can come back to the board and ask to be rotated. And then the manager committee, we had Matt Germain has shown an interest in being on the manager committee. And if there's not a problem with that, I think we should appoint Matt to the manager committee, because there is a lot of work right ahead of us here shortly on that. And is that acceptable to the board?
Yes.
Okay, so...
Do you need a formal motion, or do you...
Not necessarily on the committee, but on the Planning Commission, there should be.
So I'll entertain a motion for Joe Collini to be on the Planning Commission.
I'll move.
Support?
Motion by Trustee Petrucci, second by Trustee Germain. Any discussion?
do I need to abstain from this? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
We're going to pass either way.
Being all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you for stepping up and taking that leadership role.
I only hope that I can serve as well as Larry did, because Larry was a long-term liaison to the board and did a very good job of reporting and bringing matters before our board, giving us heads up on the things that were coming through. So I only hope I can do as well.
Okay. Thank you. Manager's report?
Oh, he was also our recording secretary for the ZBA.
Yes.
Did Bill tell you about that part of it?
No?
I did it a couple times. I wouldn't mind doing the job as infrequently.
It's not required as part of
Right.
that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's kidding.
That was part of the clerk's responsibility, though, wasn't it?
No, he just, Ann always did it.
It was convenient for the
Right.
clerk to do it.
Oh, okay. All right.
So if we have any between now and then, I wouldn't mind doing it.
Okay.
Wasn't that,
Which we will have
okay.
probably later this month or so.
So do you want
Manager Wickman?
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Just a couple highlights from the operational reports. I put the dates out there for that potential informal gathering with the Board of Education. We were looking at 2 dates. There was a conflict on one. I didn't hear from anybody whether March 9th was a conflict with anybody. I do believe that's going to be a Monday night is when they meet. So from 6 to 6:30 at the old high school. Just no agenda, just gathering with them. We'll be in touch with them to confirm But I just want to make sure that there's no conflicts before we move forward with that date of March 9th.
Boy, that's
6 p.m.
that's really close to. Yeah, it is.
So it starts at 6?
It started at 6 because their meetings start at 6:30.
Yeah, that should be fine.
Okay. In regards to, and I don't know, Mr. Supervisor, when you wanted to talk about the process for selection, because it's not on the agenda. I don't know if you want to talk about that now during your
Well,
report.
I think part of we could, if it's okay with the board, I think we should talk about it. And James, why don't you just go ahead? It was nice enough for you to put this time frame really together in the process that's probably required by the statute.
Yeah, the third page there is just what the administrative committee talked about yesterday as a potential. Obviously, there's a number of ways you can do it. This one seemed to mirror the most because this is the fourth one since I've been with you that we've done. If it pleases the board, we can get the word out right away tomorrow, and then folks would have until Sunday the 18th to submit their interest, with the idea that, like we did in the last round, we had 10-minute quick interviews with everybody who applied. If we could plan to do that before the next regular meeting on the 20th, starting at 5 o'clock, and we can move that up if there's not enough applicants to fill up the time, but around that 5 o'clock time frame, and do those short interviews, then the board can narrow it down to your finalists for final interviews at a special meeting, potentially on Tuesday the 27th. If it works out, the board could make its appointment at that time. That way, the new clerk could begin right away if their availability allows.
And that would be a special meeting, correct?
Yeah, I thought the only thing, didn't we discuss on the 20th, if we only have 2 or 3 candidates, we could possibly have the longer interview right then?
That is, right,
Right.
yeah, right. We could do that approach as well. So depending on how many come in, we just
Right.
build in a contingency in case, because last time we did get 7 or 8, or 9 maybe,
Right.
As I recall. So this one's a little bit different. So obviously, the board can choose whatever process it wants. I tried to recall what we had done, something like last time, so whatever pleases the board. And then that availability for that date, for the special meeting on the 27th, or some other day if you prefer. What I would propose, as you think about this, the next regular meeting on the 20th, we would normally be doing our organizational review and my review. The meeting that we were looking at tentatively for next week was to review the benchmarking study and the compensation study that I've not been able to complete yet this week. If it's okay, I would propose that maybe we move those discussions that we were going to have next week, move those to the 20th, the meeting on the 20th, and then the meeting on the 27th could be the organizational review and my review, and that could be done whether or not, there are finalist interviews that day. So I would throw that out for your consideration.
Well, Mike, what are your thoughts for a time frame for the meeting on Tuesday the 20th?
Well, our normal meeting's at 7.
No, I mean, how long are you expecting that to...
Oh, that one? That would be the one, if we, instead of doing the organizational review and my review, I expect it to actually be shorter. That because we'd be talking about the benchmarking study, and there's only really a couple of talking points out of that. And then the compensation study, that might garner more conversation. I would still expect that to be shorter than when we do the organizational review and my review.
Okay. So you're thinking an hour and a half?
That's up to the board. How long you want to take?
I just want to make sure that
I don't want to take too
give an
long.
appropriate time. If we start at 5 o'clock,
Right.
and of course that could change, I guess, depending on how many people apply.
Yeah, if you
Right.
had 4 or 5, we could bump that to 5:45 or so, whatever makes sense.
What are your thoughts as board members? Is this acceptable as an approach, the timelines that we have here? Matt, are you comfortable with this? Joe? Any other thoughts?
Well, unless we get a whole lot of applicants,
That would be
then the 20th might be, you say 10 minutes apart, but
Well,
sometimes it goes 15, and now if you have 10 people, you're talking an hour and a half right there.
well, my thoughts were if we have somebody that's willing, if we have several people that are willing to put their name in, that everybody should have a say.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm just wondering if we have enough time on the 20th to do that.
Well, that's what we did last time. We had like 7 or 8.
We had Matt.
And you stuck to the 10 minutes fairly well. You met, because I was reviewing all my files on that. You did it similar to this before, and you gave them 10 minutes. You were able to do it anyway.
And then we had the second interview after that with the final 2
All right, yeah, I agree with the concept.
Because we asked them all the same questions, and it pretty well.
Is that okay? If there's...
Because we have to February 6th to get them in.
Well, we can always adjust this process at some point if we need to. We'll start with this. And how will we get the notification out that there's going to be the deadline in the process?
Yeah, we'll do a news release to the Press and Argus and WHMI, and then we'll put it on the website, on social media. We'll get the word out. I think, certainly people have been paying attention as well to what's happened, and I'm sure they're expecting that. If anybody might be of interest already, I'm sure.
Okay.
May I ask James a question? Sure. For the benefit of those watching or here in person, can you briefly describe what the qualifications are required to put your name in as clerk?
Yes, they have to be a qualified elector, which means they have to have lived in the township for 30 days and be 18 years old and registered to vote. They don't have to own property, just have to be a resident, and that's basically it.
And then this is an appointed position. Yeah. This is an appointed position that would be brought back to the next election, which is roughly a year and a half from now.
They would be up for re-election in
Same time we would be.
Right. The August 2016 primary is with their first time on the ballot.
Okay. August 2016.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else with your report tonight?
I think there was one other thing. I just wanted to call out another thing I'm sure you caught, and just wanted to make sure the board was fully engaged. There is, with the Winterfest event at Settlers Park, Heritage Park, the Chamber is looking at hosting and sponsoring a beer tent. The board has never adopted a policy as it relates to this. There's no ordinance, there's no restrictions on that. And my impression is that's fine and intentional. Because there's nothing that requires formal approval from the board, I just want to make sure that if the board would want to
We don't have anything that requires that at least a permit, knowing that they have pulled the requisite, permits from the Michigan Liquor Control Commission. We don't have anything on the books.
So that would fall under review under the special events ordinance. Those types of things would be a part of the review. Where is it located, infrastructure, and proper permits, whether we do that for food, and I'm sure we'd do the same for liquor.
Well, the only thing I'm concerned about is making sure whoever is pulling that and the chamber has adequate insurance in place.
Right.
And the same goes for, I think they're sponsoring the tent as well.
Correct.
And my concern would be, especially in the winter, that there's something covering that. It is going to be on township property, so we have exposures there from people using the tent, and of course, those drinking on site.
We're working very closely with the insurance company on all of the events. They have a pretty rigorous program to make sure that all the events are safe and the proper risk management's in place.
Who are you talking to from MMRMA?
I don't. Our representative is Katie Schoening, but I'm not sure if we're working directly with her or not. That's all I had this evening, unless there's any other questions of me.
Any other questions for our manager tonight? Dean, do you have something?
There was one question I did have. It had to do with the study that you were working on. How are you planning on presenting that in terms of the benchmarking?
Yeah.
We're not getting into that today, but how are you planning on presenting that in terms of so the public can see, or is this something going to be more of a just work session discussion?
I was looking at it as a work session discussion, just to kind of summarize. I mean, you can read for yourself what my findings were, but just for the benefit of maybe diving deeper, answering any questions you have. There were a couple of takeaways that were of some significance, I thought. That could become something that becomes a public information. That wasn't my initial audience, but if that's something we want to do.
And that's what my point was,
Right.
because there were some interesting things that you discussed in the report, or at least in the preliminary report, that I thought I have several questions on. So.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on to item number 12A, which is revenue projections. Sorry. Are you going to put this up on
I can do that, yes.
my computer's updating?
Yeah, I tried myself on my phone doing that.
It says don't shut it off.
So as we do every year, the first meeting in January, we look at the projection of the revenues for the general fund and all other funds. Nothing particularly earth-shattering or magical about these numbers. We fairly well know, within a small percentage what, tax base is going to be for property taxes, what the state shared revenue is projected to be because of the state's revenue estimating conference. And so I would, you can see it's about a 3. This is not a user-friendly view. Let me see if I can pull it up in a different view.
Got a blue screen.
Overall, the general fund is projected to go up about 3.6% next year and about 3% the following year. We're continuing with our 2-year budget projection approach. And the documents that follow kind of go into more detail on those estimates. And then I did receive a question from a board member about the fund balances. There was for the other funds, when we get to them, I'm passing out a sheet that talks about those numbers, because there was, the way it was presented was unclear about the fund balance from year to year, because it just showed the revenues, and it looked like there was cash piling up, but there was no expenses to offset that. So this gives you a little better reference as to what at the beginning of the year, how much cash each of those funds would be starting with.
I'm going to interrupt.
Yeah.
James, and say this is our cash balances, unreserved cash balances as of December 31st.
Okay.
So it's tough for me to do projected
Yes.
cash until we get into the expenses and update, for instance, the sewer long-term cash flow. So.
Yep. And so that's without the benefit of a full cycle of tax collection, which is, of course, yet to come. If you look at the other funds or the non-enterprise funds, if you stay in the column of the projected activity of year-end fund balance, you're basically seeing where we're projecting that cash to be. It's just we put on the unreserved cash balance mostly for the benefit of those enterprise funds that, have assets and other things in there, and that gets to be confusing.
So the way I read this, our beginning fund balance back in January of 2014 was 1.98.
That's correct.
April 1, yep.
Yeah.
And as of 12/31, it's 1.7, but we haven't received all our tax revenue.
That's correct.
It hasn't been completely collected, which it's due by February
Second.
20th?
Second.
I paid mine, so.
When's it due by?
March 2nd this year, because it falls on a weekend.
Is there a separate fund in here for the tax revenue that is being set aside for the roads?
Yeah, that's actually right under the general fund. Fund 204 is our new municipal.
Okay, so there's...
Road fund.
Got it. So that's a fund that obviously doesn't have a previous balance because it's a new fund.
Exactly.
We sure haven't collected as much.
No, not yet.
Your portion's there. My portion's there.
No, it's not. This is only distribution of December 1st through the 15th.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the 15th to the 31st hasn't been distributed yet.
So are there any questions on any of the general fund line items as far as how those were, the methodology, or how those were calculated?
Just briefly,
Yeah.
where you came up with those percentages?
Yes.
What was the methodology behind?
Well, I'm just looking at the bottom line of this spreadsheet for is where you totaled all of them up. So each one has their own little intricacies. Some of them are going up on average 5%. Some of them are lower, of course. At the end of the day, the total general fund revenue, using a fairly good methodology for each line item, nets about 3.6% increase for next year. So each one's different. If there's a particular one you'd like to dive into, there are these supporting spreadsheets behind, kind of show the methodology and how they each increase from year to year, whether it be the tax base or the state shared revenue. State shared revenue is projected about the 6.3% increase for next year, and 4.3% for next year, 4.2% for the following year, based on projections and sales tax revenue increasing. That could change with the ballot initiative in May. That would increase maybe 1%, another 1%, based on that sales tax increase. Cable franchise revenue continues to go up about, on average, 5% a year, and other smaller amounts you can see there.
Speaking of franchises, when we had the issue with ITC and they built the transmission lines, that was based on the DTE obtaining a franchise from the township, and that was supposed to that comes up to a vote, I believe, every certain period of time. In intervals of 10 or 15 or 20 years.
Something like that.
And I remember in litigation on over that franchise that they were very close to having to have that reapproved, and I don't know. Can you look into that?
Yeah.
Because that, I think, requires a vote of the people, if I'm not mistaken.
I can look.
You said that was a 10-year show?
It could be 15 or more.
15 or 20.
Yeah.
But, I remember the litigation when we were looking at that issue, that became a question and the timing, and it'd be interesting to take a look at that.
Sure.
What we can and cannot do about it.
Yeah. Any other questions on general fund? We'll move over to the other funds then. So the other funds are fairly straightforward. They're in a different format along with these other reports out of BSNA. Again, if you want to disregard these, at the end of each fund, there's this beginning fund balance, ending fund balance. It just shows the cash continue to accumulate, and that's obviously not the case. We know what the municipal street fund is going to be, again, based on the tax-based projections. About $870,000 next year, $890,000 the following year, or this next year, and then $905,000, $906,000 the next year.
What's the anticipated projection when our taxable will reach a point it was prior to 2009? So their tax revenues.
Boy, that's a good question. Let me get back to you on that.
It's going to be held back by inflation, so we don't know what that.
So, it looks like we're going up in tax revenue roughly about $10,000 a year almost on the collected tax revenue, right? Mm-hmm. We were as high as 552 or 452,000.
Right.
Where are we at now, 490?
We are at 473,901, and that's projected for 2015, 2016. So we're still, roughly $70,000 less.
We have to remember two things that happened to us this year. One, we got the small business exemption,
Yep.
personal property, and two, they gave up the state veterans exemptions, and we had several of those given up.
I'm curious, how does that work? I'd like to have
They
a
get exempt totally. If they're 100% disabled, they do not pay any tax.
That goes all through the VA.
Yep.
The township has no, we have to approve it, but we have, if they meet the standards of the veterans as sold at the VA, yep.
It's great.
New construction would, of course, help that grow faster. As far as the other funds, again, the fire fund is the same as far as based on the taxable value projections. Liquor law, I guess just stop me if there are any questions. We've gone through these pretty well fast in years past. I apologize for not turning that light off earlier. It makes it a little bit easier to read. The SADs for the various road SADs.
Did the road down here wait till next spring?
It is, yes.
That's what I thought.
They patch some potholes for now and then do it in the spring. Capital projects fund are just transfers of our surplus. Valley water system. These are based off the rate study. Over the next year or next 2 years, we'll be updating the sewer and water rate study. So more to come on that. So far, things are performing fairly well within expectations from a revenue standpoint. The PEG fund for cable is standard, and sewer fund. And our SADs for the sewer. Any, I don't want to go too fast, but I know that these are pretty straightforward, so there are.
Is it anticipated to update the Boyle model? Was it this spring?
Well, every year we do it. And what's the timeline again for that?
It'll be second meeting in February.
Okay.
Yep.
Good.
Just a quick question on the how close have we been? We generally close to what they projected?
Every year we've exceeded the case. And then we'll blow it out of the water if the sale goes through, of course. So that's revenue projections in a nutshell. If there are any other questions.
I have two relatively simple questions. Have we started a new fund for the road that's supposed to be the private drive off of Dunham Road?
For Ore Valley Drive?
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Was that in here?
It is. There's a couple of them. There's a construction and the SAD. Those are, what are the fund numbers on those?
A test.
Yes.
408, I think, is the construction fund.
Yep, 408.
And 357, or 358, or 368, 367, 358 is the,
357.
all right, 3 is the SAD.
Yeah.
So were the funds for that project already collected?
We're starting.
It was already assessed for this year. They endorsed us waiting based on all the circumstances at hand. There's still nothing but positive feedback from those residents.
Right, and then my second question was, can you provide an explanation on the variability historically in the reimbursed admin fees that are received from water and sewer?
Yeah, and we'll look at that deeper when we get into the expenses. Every year we reevaluate the percentage of time from the various staff positions is being spent in sewer and water. And some years it's been heavier than others, and I know the goal for me is to spend less time in sewer and water, and therefore they don't have to reimburse as much. So that's fluctuated based on the different activities and energy we spent resolving issues in those various places.
And what did it mean by the footnote about it's going to be reevaluated after expenses?
So this particular revenue isn't exact. It's an estimate. If you recall, there's a spreadsheet with everybody's time and wage and compensation data, and then a percentage applied. We haven't done that work yet until we get into the expense side, which we'll do next month. For now, we just put a placeholder in this estimate of the ballpark if we were to stay status quo, and we'll fine-tune that number for the expense side, and we'll update this then.
So I understand what you're saying, but I don't know if you answered my question fully. I'll
Okay.
ask it differently.
Okay.
Let's pretend that the economy just really goes gangbusters in the next 8 or 9 months, and we end up selling REUs and way beyond our wildest imagination.
I like that.
The amounts for the next year's fiscal budget under this, 536 and 590, the last two at the bottom there.
Yeah.
Since this is just an estimated budget, could that number exceed what we anticipated based on real life?
Yep.
Okay.
And it has, in some cases. Yeah. That's a good problem.
Very good. I don't like doing work for free.
Anything else on the revenue? Thank you, Susan. I don't know, do you need to stay for the Parks and Rec? You can if you want.
I know I could.
So our next information will be...
Sounds more interesting than the budget.
How about revenues are more exciting?
DPW Director Bob West is going to give us an update on the Park and Rec Task Force and their recommendations.
Good evening, board members, and just wanted to give you some brief information, just kind of a follow-up report to the Parks and Rec Task Force. As you know, the Parks and Rec Task Force was basically developed to deliver some recommendations and to be used in the Parks Master Plan that's currently being updated. So it is not an actual. It's more of a supplemental to the Parks Master Plan, is the best way to phrase it. So I'll just give you a brief summary. We've had 3 meetings, and essentially it started off with the Parks Task Force. They completed the same survey that the Township Board members took, and basically we took that list and then had some open conversation and discussion about the priorities of the parks and where the task force members see that fit and the best use of the township funds for the next projects coming up. Let's see. The sheet that's up there right now, this is basically the results from the Park Task Force. When the board members took the survey, you actually had years, not phases. but because of the concern that the task force members may get overzealous and with expectations as far as what could actually be completed within a single year, we actually broke it down into phases. You'll see on the Board of Trustees approved 2-year CIP list, we've also changed your years to phases as well, just to kind of make them keep the symmetry between the two lists. So this was a list that they came up with. There was some discussion with regards to the funding and the amount of funds allocated for each project, as well as the priority. Additionally, they also made some maintenance recommendations, which were just a little bit lower on the same list. The maintenance recommendations are merely that we did not want the Parks Task Force to actually scope out the level of maintenance. We believe that would be better served in-house, but rather just to create some maintenance recommendations. So what you see before you is basically, in a nutshell, the one-page end result from the Parks Task Force. Moving forward, what Public Works is now doing is we're trying to analyze the Parks Task Force projects, similar to the forms that you had before you in the CIP report, which will include construction costs as well as future maintenance of these particular projects, because that's not covered in this particular report. So we look to have that kind of coincide with the delivery of the Parks Master Plan. We feel that would be an appropriate time for the board to reevaluate the 2-year approved master plan. There was caveats associated with some of the projects that the board members wanted to wait and see the outcome of the task force as well as the master plan. So I'll open it up.
Yeah, so no decisions tonight. This is for you to start chewing on as we lead up to the capital improvement plan update, which will be coming in April-May timeframe. When we adopted that multi-year or that 2-year capital improvement plan last year, we knew this was coming. We had a lot of conversation around, some of the parks projects that was in that CIP, and said, the work of the master plan may change our priorities a little bit. There may be new projects. These are the recommendations. Obviously, it's your decision to move forward with what projects and in what order. But this is for your consideration in doing that. So I don't know if the board has any questions about any of the projects or want to have any discussion in anticipation of that CIP. Yeah.
We hired McKenna to assist putting a Parks and Rec plan together.
Correct, the master plan.
Where is that in the process in relationship to this task force?
The task force was more or less a separate entity from the master plan. It was used to basically develop the citizen input component of the master plan. So they've been working behind the scenes on our master plan with our own in-house staff. This is more of a supplemental, which will be included in the master plan.
And when do you anticipate that being completed?
Mid-February.
Okay.
So we look, I believe it's got to be to the state by March 1st.
Yeah.
So we'll certainly have it before the board well before then. So
That's so that we can get future funding through the
yes,
trust. Correct.
that will make us eligible for the state funding.
And then there was a grant that I mentioned earlier. It was some through the DNR. It's monies that they I think it's from the DNR. The monies that they collect in conjunction with their pass. It's called the Passport grant. And they're smaller grants. Are we looking into that as well?
We are. We're actually diving into all the grant opportunities that are out there and trying to line them up appropriately with the projects on the list. As part of that revised CIP document or report where we list the project costs with the maintenance, we'll also have what grants they're eligible for potentially.
Yeah, because some of these items here, which are pretty, some of them are just the basic aspects of what should be in a park, like trash cans and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
I doubt if those kinds of grants may fund that kind of thing.
No, and I always feel the need to interject in the grant conversation. Some reality is that a lot of these projects do not fit within, the things that they're really looking for. Nature trails, overlooks, observation areas, even picnic pavilions, those are in what they like to see. A lot of this stuff is not, so I don't want to, I want realistic expectations of what we
Right.
can expect funding for.
But we do have areas, natural areas right here in Sutton
Yep.
Park.
That's right.
That
Yep.
would really benefit using some of those natural outlook and trail grants.
Yep.
And even the back of Heritage.
Heritage
too.
on Buller Lake, would
Yeah.
be nice to have some sort of
Outlook.
outlook there.
Yep.
Bob, can you speak briefly, because the sidewalks were originally part of the scope?
That is
And
correct.
the reason that we took sidewalks off from the Parks and Rec?
Well, originally, when the board's CIP was not necessarily centered on just parks. So when you guys took the survey, it actually included some projects that were not park-related. We basically took those projects off the survey for the Parks Task Force. However, we left any of the sidewalks that we felt may tie or lead to a park. And then the Parks Task Force then decided that they felt that there were other means, other avenues for funding of parks, and that it shouldn't be part of the park CIP. So collectively, the Parks Task Force made a recommendation to remove those, which we did. We are currently in-house searching other funding opportunities, other grants for sidewalks right now.
Would that be a detriment if those sidewalks, as a sub-chapter or subsection of this document, would it behoove us to have that in the plan? In the park plan?
Most likely they'll be included in the plan, just not with the...
Task force?
Yeah, not with the... I don't want to say support, the endorsement of the task force.
In being part of those discussions, I think it was best to take the sidewalks off because there was a lot of attention on those, and there was some big dollar numbers attached to those.
Yeah, the opportunity costs associated with sidewalks,
Right.
what you can get in exchange for it.
Right. So
Certainly.
I just wanted the board to understand that we all kind of agree that it's a discussion that still needs to happen, but for the task force perspective, it was clouding some of the issues as well.
Yes, that's accurate.
And
very
and you did a really nice job with the wrap-up of that whole 3 meetings. And again, on behalf of all the folks that sat in there, I think we had 20?
Yeah, I think our peak, we hit 22.
22 people, citizens came out and gave their great input, and that's what makes a good task force. So here's the second one in a row we've had between the roads and that task force. We've had a lot of people getting involved. So job well done.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I understand that the task force has come up with 21 specific different recommendations divided into 3 phases. Is that true?
That is correct. Now, originally, the survey had 5 different phases. We decided collectively that to focus on only the first 3 phases, given the level of commitment that would be required, any homework, for lack of a better word, we did on phases 4 and 5, by the time we get to those down the road, any numbers we had projected would probably be outdated and need to be refreshed anyway.
Okay. So, and does the task force have a recommendation in how quickly they would like to see Phase 1 completed or Phase 2?
The recommendation was more of a priority in which what projects they would want to see in order. It was clearly defined that the role of the task force was not to set a timeline or determine when, just a matter of what order. We felt that the township board should reserve that right.
Okay, that's fair. And then the last question I had is that the report refers to it as task force recommendation. That's the heading for the dollar amounts for each project. How were those estimates developed?
Basically, what we did was we gave the task force a dollar range for a minimal whatever particular item, the minimal cost, and then a higher end level, and kind of an example throughout the state that we have seen. And they chose a balance on what they felt. And I can give you an example for
Playground.
Yeah, exactly. For a playground, you can build a $40,000 playground structure, or you can build a $300,000 playground structure. And they basically gauged that. There was very healthy conversation, a little bit of back and forth over what the actual need was at each park for each feature. So that's basically, it was more what they felt was needed there. That's probably the best way to describe it.
Okay. So at what point is it part of the CIP plan to put together every project is based on three things: what the scope of work is, how fast you want it done, and what type of quality you want. So, like, if I look at item number 3, let's look at item 3 in Settlers Park is a picnic pavilion. It could be 90,000 square feet, or it could be 100,000 square feet. I mean, at what point do we decide exactly what type of pavilion do we want, which then drives what the cost is going to be?
Now, we do have some details in the report as to specific details that were requested or recommended for each project. We have a much more in-depth, we took many notes, so we have all those conversation pieces that we will compile into a revised CIP document, which again will cover each project, the Parks Task Force recommendations for scope, for time frame, as well as what future maintenance costs will be on that.
So when we dive into the CIP, each of these projects will have a page, and it'll be more detailed description of maybe it's square footage, maybe it's, architectural quality or whatever, maybe a picture in many cases. Kind of and then talk about what the original investment is and annual maintenance costs, those types of things. So we'll get into that detail in the CIP.
What I'm most curious about is the timing on the CIP, and how will it drive our budget that we're going to be trying to pass next spring or late this winter?
Well, what you'll find in the budget is we've included the projects that you said last April you'd like to see done in 2015. And we need that kind of lead time. We need to, plan, design, engineer in some cases. And so on a rolling cycle, we'll update that CIP in April, May, and you'll be looking at this is what we want to do next year. So the decisions about what you wanted to focus on for this year were essentially made back last April, May, in the CIP. If you want to change that, that is your privilege.
Yeah, but getting back to Bill's question, he says, what's the status of the Parks Master Plan? Because we should really have that at our disposal and our review it to try to gauge how fast we want to go into the CIP. It's kind of like dominoes. We've got to get one done and another. And I'm just wondering how much it may just come down, like you just said, for this next fiscal year, just setting aside a dollar amount just to have it as, anticipated funds, and decide exactly how that money will be spent as the year progresses.
Well, it depends, because we have a construction season, and we got to plan that work out and make it fit within other projects. In an ideal world, we'd have it done. The board didn't necessarily want to wait on that to move forward with a number of projects. So we'll continue to plan that. But as we go through the budget, you can take them out, put them in. If we start to change that, we'll obviously have to talk about what's feasible for other staff workload. But during the budget time, we can talk about them.
Okay. The last thing I wanted to say is that, again, as Bill just said, I'm really grateful for the time and effort that those committee members put in, and it's demonstrated in the quality of even this summary report that we've seen. The one thing I saw that was most interesting was the recommendation to build things at Springer and at the Hero Center. And I'd never even thought of that, but it's sure, hearing it from another person, it sounds like a great idea. So I'm thankful for that.
Other questions? again, just to add on why we have this priority to it, also allows us to have opportunity for sponsorships through businesses, and that opportunity as well, so they can see what's coming down the road, and maybe jumpstart some of these other projects.
Yep.
Can we use this as, I know in some of our PDs, there's an opportunity for community enhancements. Is this something that can be used for that purpose as well?
Absolutely.
So, I know we're working with the buyer of the property, a purchaser of the property at Pleasant Valley and M59, those properties that the township acquired through the foreclosure process. And that may be a very good opportunity for some of these things, especially being adjacent to Heritage Park, that might benefit us. So as we think about these things, and as you're, we don't want to silo that
Right.
project. We want to maybe make sure the Planning Commission is also in tune with these opportunities as they work with the developers on the planning.
Yeah, that particular project's a little trickier because we've talked about some other things, extending the water system, Pleasant Valley Road, and
I understand.
an area for a potential fire station, so
Right.
can only
But it is something
squeeze so much.
Any other questions? Thank you for your report.
Yeah, thanks, Bob.
There's nothing else on our agenda. If anybody else has something they'd like to add, if not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by trustee Kalani, second by trustee Harper. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, nay. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.